The polished mahogany of the dinner table reflected the cold, diamond-like light of the chandelier above. It was a long table, built for dynasties, and tonight it felt like a battlefield laid out for a formal surrender. Each clink of silver against porcelain, each carefully rehearsed laugh, echoed in the cavernous dining room of the Brooks family's coastal Maine estate. This was the annual ritual, a display of legacy and power. And I, Natalie, was the ghost at the feast last year. My father, a titan of Wall Street whose voice could move markets, had raised his crystal glass. He toasted my brother, Daniel, for his latest conquest at a global hedge fund. He toasted my sister, Emily, for orchestrating the flawless media narrative of a banking IPO. Then, his gaze had found me, seated halfway down the table, obscured by a floral arrangement. And to Natalie he'd said, a thin, almost pitying smile on his lips, she's still exploring her options. The table had chuckled, a gentle wave of amusement at the family's resident eccentric. I had laughed too. It's the camouflage you wear when you're born into a pride of lions but feel like a field mouse. Tonight, nothing had changed on the surface. I wore the same simple dress, drove the same reliable but unimpressive car. I was a fixed variable in their equation of success, and that was the point. While they were mapping out stock options and succession plans, I was in a disused airfield hangar outside Boston, mapping the flight paths of autonomous drones. While they traded in futures and derivatives, I was building the future of medical logistics. My company, Aerologix, had spent 3 years developing a system to deliver time-sensitive medical supplies, transplant organs, rare blood types, life-saving antidotes to places that helicopters couldn't reach and ambulances took too long to find. This morning, our work had been validated, not by a family toast, but by a formal acquisition offer that put our valuation at $200 million. But they didn't know that. The silence was my strategy. My brother Daniel, whose tailored suit probably cost more than my first server array, was holding court. He spoke of market volatility and emerging economies with the casual authority of a man who believed the world was his to command. Emily, sharp and sleek, interjected with anecdotes about managing the public image of their firm's CEO, turning a financial downturn into a story of resilient leadership. My mother beamed, her pride a palpable force field around her 2 perfect children. They spoke a language of power, of assets and influence. I spoke a language of code, of payload capacities and algorithmic efficiency. To them, it was gibberish. Mine drifted back, not to last year's dinner, but to my graduation from MIT. Double major thesis published, top of my class. I remember scanning the sun-drenched balcony, a sea of waving hands and proud tear-streaked faces. I searched for my family, for that one pocket of celebration meant for me. But their seats were empty. Daniel was at a conference in Shanghai. Emily was schmoozing at a political fundraiser in D.C. My parents had sent a text that morning from a yacht. Club gala. Asterisk, so proud of you, sweetheart. Followed by a picture of my mother's evening gown. That silence in the cheering crowd didn't break me. It forged me. It taught me that waiting for their applause was a fool's errand. You had to build your own stadium, and I did. I found an old, forgotten hangar at a municipal airport, a place that smelled of oil and rain and neglect. It was there, surrounded by cracked concrete and fueled by lukewarm coffee, that Aerologix was born. My first investor wasn't a venture capitalist. It was Mr. Abernathy, the estate's retired groundskeeper. He'd found me in the family garage as a teenager, trying to build a miniature helicopter out of a lawnmower engine. He never laughed. He'd just peer at my schematics, his hands gnarled from a lifetime of work, and say, "Always knew you saw the world from a higher altitude, Miss Natalie." When I started the company, he sent me a check for $5,000, his entire life savings, with a note that said, "For the wings." A sharp clearing of a throat brought me back to the present. My father placed his wineglass down. The air grew still. It was the signal. As you all know, he began, his voice resonating with boardroom gravity, your mother and I have been restructuring the family trust. Daniel, with your new position as partner, it's time to transfer the Hamptons property fully into your name. Daniel nodded, a regal acceptance. Emily, your portfolio will be expanded to include a controlling interest in our media holdings. Your work has earned it. Emily smiled, a perfect calculated display of gratitude. My stomach didn't drop. It turned to ice. I knew what was coming next. The preamble, the justification, the execution. And Natalie, he said, his gaze finally settling on me. The warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by the cool assessment of a risk manager. Your venture, while ambitious, lacks the stability and market visibility we require for a major asset allocation. It's an unproven model in a volatile space. My mother chimed in, her voice a soft silken blade. This isn't a punishment, darling, it's prudence. We just can't pour family capital into something so uncertain. We need to protect the legacy. Protect it from me, she meant. They were cutting me out. Not with anger, but with the chilling indifference of a corporate downsizing. They had reviewed my life's work on their balance sheet and written it off as a loss. I placed my fork and knife down, the silver making a quiet, definitive sound against the china. I looked at my father, the banker, at my brother, the hedge fund king, at my sister, the PR guru. So, to be clear, I said, my voice even and calm, you see no value in my work. It's not about value, Nat, Daniel said, leaning forward. About metrics. Tangible returns. Your company doesn't have them. Before I could respond, my phone, sitting face down on the table, lit up. Then it vibrated a persistent, urgent buzz. It was a news alert from the Wall Street Journal. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then a second vibration. A call from number I recognized, a top tech reporter. The headline of the alert was visible even from across the table, stark against the dark wood. Asterisk global tech giant Viridian makes unsolicited $200 million. Acquisition offer for logistics drone startup. Aerologics, asterisk, a deafening silence fell over the room. It was heavier than chandeliers, older than the ancestral portraits staring down from the walls. Daniel squinted, his brain furiously processing the headline. Emily's perfectly composed face slackened into disbelief. My father's hand, holding his wineglass, froze halfway to his lips. He recognized the name Viridian. Everyone in their world did. I let the silence hang for a moment longer before calmly answering the call. Putting it on speaker. Natalie Brooks speaking. Ms. Brooks, apologies for the intrusion. The reporter's voice crackled through the phone, crisp and professional. We're running a story on the Viridian offer. It's just gone public. Any comment on the $200 million valuation? I met my father's stunned gaze. We're certainly flattered by Viridian's interest, I said, my voice unwavering. The reporter was asking a question, but my answer was for the room. However, Aerologics is not for sale. Our mission to revolutionize medical delivery is just beginning. We have no further comment at this time. I ended the call and placed the phone back on the table. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the deafening sound of their world shifting on its axis. My father was the first to speak. His voice strained. Viridian. They approached you. They see the metrics. I said simply, dot. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes wide with a frantic, newfound respect. 200 million. Nat, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped. We could have leveraged that, brought in our own investors, created a Brooks family tech initiative. We could brand this. Emily jumped in, her mind already spinning a new narrative. The brilliant innovator, nurtured by a family of financial visionaries. It's a perfect story for the campaign, for the firm. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly as she went to place it on mine. Sweetheart, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We were just worried. We didn't want you to get hurt. We had no idea." I pulled my hand back, not out of anger, but out of a simple need for distance. "No," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table. "You weren't worried, you were embarrassed. You didn't have no idea. You just never bothered to ask." I looked at each of them. "For 10 years, you have treated my passion like a child's hobby. You laughed at my work, and now that a price tag is attached, a price tag, you understand, you want to put your name on it." I stood up, the chair scraping softly against the marble floor. "The Brooks family legacy," I said, looking around the opulent room, "is about assets you can own, control, and put on a balance sheet. That's fine, but my legacy is not an asset, it's a mission. And it's not for sale. Not to Viridian, and not to you." I turned and walked away from the table, from the sea bass and the Bordeaux, from the stunned faces and the shattered assumptions. As I reached the grand hallway, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Mr. Abernathy. Asterisk, your investment just matured. It's time to build some new wings. Asterisk, weeks later, I stood on the tarmac of that same municipal airport. It was no longer neglected. A new sign stood at the entrance. The Abernathy Innovation Airfield. It was the first project of my new foundation, the Abernathy Grant, dedicated to funding brilliant, unconventional minds who don't have a family trust to fall back on. My family wasn't here. They had sent a professionally catered gift basket and a letter filled with words like reconnect and misunderstanding. I hadn't opened it in front of me, a young woman, a 19-year-old engineering student and the first recipient of the grant, preparing her prototype for its maiden flight. It was a small, ungainly drone designed to deliver water purification kits to disaster zones. Her hands shook with nerves and excitement. She looked at me, her eyes full of doubt. "What if it doesn't work?" I smiled, the setting sun warming my face. "Then you build it again, but better." She nodded, took a deep breath, and launched it. We watched together as the little drone climbed, banking against the vast open sky. It wasn't a story of revenge. It was a story of creation. I wasn't the ghost at their feast anymore. I was the architect of my own, building a new legacy, one flight, one saved life. One quiet, undeniable step at a time, high above the world that had once looked down on me.